Good morning, friends of the Museum of South Texas History. My name is Francisco Guajardo, the Chief Executive Officer of the museum. And we welcome you to 2024 and our series of Museum Platicas. Today, we're going to start with a tradition that's almost 100 years old in the Rio Grande Valley. South Texas, the entire century, really, of the 20th century, was so driven by agriculture. Citrus kind of at the center of claiming an identity for the region. And there was a festival that was created really during the Great Depression. Early in the Great Depression, there was a festival created to celebrate citrus and agriculture in South Texas. And today, we have a person who's been completely kind of enmeshed with this whole history. You know, his family, his parents probably had something to do with participating in it when they came down to South Texas in the 1950s. So today we're going to talk about the Texas Citrus Festival. But before we do that, we're going to get into the life story of our guest. So his name is Dennis Holbrook. He's from Mission. And so we're going to have a plática with Dennis when we come back. So stay with us, and thank you for joining us on this January 2024 Museum Platica.
Ranch Fest, featuring ranch-style food, live demonstrations, and performances. This event celebrates ranch life and heritage in South Texas with roping, wood carving, and more. Expect live performances by local conjunto and mariachi high school groups. And enjoy tacos, a ranch favorite. Bring family and friends to enjoy Ranch Fest, Saturday, February 10th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Museum of South Texas History in Edinburgh.
Under the executive order of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, all persons can sell their gold below market value to the government.
Enterré oro bajo de la casa. Úsalo para cuidar a tu hermano.
I found gold.
That's my gold.
That's my father's gold.
The jury finds the true owner to be.
It's a story filled with mystery, intrigue, and one's birthright. Dr. Garcia's gold exhibit is on display at the Museum of South Texas History. Go to mosthistory.org for more information.
Welcome back, friends of the museum. I am Francisco Guajardo, and I'm joined this morning by Dennis Holbrook. And so, Dennis, welcome to the museum.
Thank you, Francisco.
You just told me, thank you. You just told me that you've been here maybe 4 or 5 times through the years, and so I'm taken, I have to say, Dennis, by your personal story. I mean, I don't know it, fully, obviously, right? Because I mean, you and I just met this morning. But as somebody who is steeped in South Texas history, it seems that you have been, and your family is as well. Explain to me how that is true.
Well, my
my parents were from Utah, and they were farming there with my grandfather and two other uncles. When they outgrew the farm as the families started to grow, they sold the farms in Utah. Two uncles went to Idaho, and my father, being the youngest of the family, always felt like he got the jobs nobody else wanted. So he decided he wanted to go somewhere that he could be his own boss. And he had the opportunity to come to South Texas, and it was in November of 1954. They had had an early winter. The snow was on the ground in Utah. It was cold. It was kind of miserable. My father never liked the cold winters. And so they had an opportunity to come here, and they fell in love with the valley. When they drove into the area, they just thought this was a paradise. You know, citrus trees, bougainvilleas in bloom, palm trees. It just had everything that you would imagine of being a paradise. And for them, that was a decision that they made. They bought property, and then in January of 1955, they packed up a big truck and all their belongings, like the grapes of wrath, and moved to South Texas.
Wow. So the Jodes went that way. The Holbrooks came this way.
That's right.
In 1954, and by the way, it didn't take them long to decide, it appears, right? I mean, November 54 they visited. By January, they were here.
That's correct.
So they didn't mess around. They liked what they saw. There's a story here, Dennis, about how when your parents came, it was like right in the middle of the whole construction of the big dam. Because
Correct.
the dam would have been unveiled right about that time, Falcon Dam.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason for that dam, obviously, is because we needed to figure out how to deal with water. Will Rogers, a great American satirist, died in 1935. At some point before 35, he quipped that the Rio Grande was the only river he knew in the world that needed to be irrigated. By the 1930s, the Rio Grande was running dry. Your parents would come to become farmers down here when the river was already endangered, but we were doing something about it because we built a dam. Place that kind of, as a family story, coming into a place where they were going to take a huge risk. A place that was beautiful, to be sure, but they were going to take a huge risk, and I'm sure your father and your mother knew that.
I think that there was some awareness to that, but at the time, a lot of the people who were promoting South Texas also knew the dam was being constructed, or plans to have it constructed in the Falcon Lake to be established. That was the resource for the answers to the drought issues, or the fact that they were able to retain water and then provide it on a metered basis as needed for irrigation. So I think in that respect, they were not too overly concerned. In fact, when they first moved here, some of the irrigation, in fact, where the majority of my father purchased his land, was in an area that was still, the canal district was still being developed through construction of canals and so forth. So it wasn't even completed at the time that they actually purchased land and came. So they were very optimistic about the future of the valley.
It was moving. The place was moving. There were public works projects and that sort of thing. Probably part of what captivated them.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Did you spend a lot of time with your father and your mother talking about these stories of 54 and 55?
Oh, I mean, we've probably shared the stories. I mean, I'm not sure if it was specifically designed as conversations as tell me about it. It was more of things that through just, casual conversation, I learned and picked up a lot of what their experiences were in this time. Because I was only 18 months old when we moved here, so
yeah,
it processed over the years.
Right. I mean, such is a way of understanding the family narrative. When was it that you first learned that your father had been the king of the Citrus Festival? Because I think I overheard you in a hallway conversation here this morning that, like in 1955, he had just gotten here.
Right.
What is that about?
Well, I think to be perfectly honest, from my perspective, it was a complete shock. I know that my family had been involved with the Fiesta. My mother was, it was a chosen organization for her to spend her time in and help support. And so we happened to be at the Fiesta the night that he was crowned as king, and I heard his name announced, and I was like, oh wow, that's my dad, that's my dad. So yeah, so that was a kind of a shock, but it was understandable. My father had gotten heavily involved in the industry, in the citrus industry, so and he was also involved in the organization kind of peripherally, but it was a great honor for him to be selected as the king.
But there must have been something about your father, because he hadn't even been here a year when he was selected.
But no, he was selected in '65.
Oh, not 55.
That's
60.
right,
So he had been here for
10
a bit.
years, yes.
Okay. Your family must have brought in a particular vigor for farming.
I think it has to do with survival.
Mm.
When you're committed to what they committed, to buying land and trying to start a business and building it up. I mean, it's about making sure that you're taking care of your family's needs, and that you can be successful in your endeavors. So I think that was the motivation.
Yeah. What did the family farm?
Well, initially they farmed a lot of row crop. They farmed cotton and grain and corn and some things like that, because it was mostly done dry land, because in the area, as I was saying earlier, the irrigation district's distribution system hadn't been completed at that point. And that really opened up opportunities for my father, because as people were buying land, most of these people were absentee owners or investors from outside of the area. They needed somebody to work the land. So my father began renting that land and farming it. And then when the irrigation came in, it just naturally transitioned into citrus. They would come to him since they already had a relationship. They said, can you plant our land into citrus? And so that created a grove care management company that my father established. And as a result of that, in addition to his own citrus, he managed properties for investors and absentee owners.
Was your mother involved in the industry as well?
No, in the beginning, my mother sought outside employment, to kind of help pay for the bills and take care of things like that. But in time, she was able to be a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm. And how many kids did your parents have?
We had just my brother and myself, just two boys.
Yeah. And so your brother and you must have been involved in the farm as children.
Growing up, yeah, I think by the time I was 10 or 11 years old, I was probably driving a tractor, doing something. My brother never had the same kind of interest in the business and working on the farm as I did, and so, but it was something that I enjoyed doing and longed to be there with my dad as well.
What were your parents' names?
Don and Zora Holbrook.
What was Zora's maiden name?
Block.
Block.
And she was raised in western Nebraska.
Of what kind of European stock?
German, and there's some a little bit of Scottish mixed in there, England.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the genealogy of our family.
Right. Any idea when they got to Nebraska?
Multiple generations prior to her, yeah. Mm-hmm. They'd been here a while.
So they were very much part of this westward expansion process.
Yes.
And your father?
Similar experiences as well. My great-great-grandfather was from New York and progressed across the country and eventually settled in Utah.
In pursuit of a religious faith, or
in conjunction with the religious faith and freedom to choose your beliefs.
So they would have landed in Utah sometime in the 19th century?
Yes, yes. Yeah, they were actually my great-great-grandfather was part of the original travel group, wagon train, if you will, that arrived in the Salt Lake Valley.
Wow. Any connection to like Brigham Young or?
Correct. He was actually a scout for the party for Brigham Young's travels.
Wow, that's a story.
Yeah.
Has that been written up by somebody?
It has. I have his genealogy or his life history that he wrote himself.
Wow.
His biography.
What's that like? That biography or life
It's
history?
interesting. It's it tells of their experiences, some of the challenges that they incurred, some of the difficulties that they were presented with. But it's a very interesting book I find it interesting anyway because it's a part of my history.
What was his name?
His name was Joseph Holbrook.
Wow. Do you tell that story often?
When opportunity avails itself, I'll share some of that story. Yes.
Is there something in his life story, in his autobiography, I suppose, that is especially striking, that in some ways tells you this makes a lot of sense for how I am the way I am, or how my father was?
I think more so because of the fact that he of the challenges that they incurred in their determination to get where they wanted to go and to do what they wanted to do and to be able to live in such a way that they felt like they've had all freedoms.
So you seem to have found a crossroads in your own life when, as a young farmer, you had already kind of like taken in all these different adversities as a farmer. When you made the decision to move away from had been traditional farming, at least 20th century traditional farming, because really old style farming was much more organic, right, than the 20th century brand. Where much like your father, I suppose, much like people in your family, that you met with adversity, you figured things out. Tell the story of, I don't know when it was, like maybe 1977 or whatever it was, when Texas Tech came in to do some testing. You invited Texas Tech, I think, and how that was a pivotal moment in the transformation of you and maybe the family.
Actually, it was a little later than that, I believe. But anyway, as far as my memory serves me. But yes, I purchased the Grove Management Company that my father had started from my family when I was 22 years old.
22. So
22.
were you out of college or?
Yes.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to school at Texas A&I University in Kingsville.
Are you one of those A&I until I die kind of guys? Because it's not that anymore, you know.
No, it's not.
They have shirts.
A&M Kingsville now.
Okay.
That's fine. It's good. I did not graduate from the university, but I went there to kind of begin my initial education.
And did you study agriculture then?
I did. I did that, and then I actually took all of the extension courses through the Citrus Center in Weslaco, so that I could familiarize myself with those growing practices and the things that I felt like were necessary to further my knowledge and career in citrus. But what actually was the beginning of my evolving with Texas Tech was they came to test agricultural workers for pesticide residues
in their bodies.
Yes. And so they weren't having a great deal of success with most companies willing to allow their employees to be tested. Obviously, there was some concerns about liability, right? So I told them when they came to me, I said, I'll allow you to test my employees, but you must test me as well. And the reason for that is that I had grown up driving spray rigs, herbicide rigs, and I actually worked for a crop duster for a year mixing chemicals. That was my basic job. And so I was a little bit concerned about, maybe what kind of residue I might have in my own system. So anyway, they tested me along with my employees. And the only results I got, obviously, was a letter from them basically telling me that you are in the 90 percentile of pesticide residues in your system, which was a little concerning because at that point, my wife and I were just beginning to have family. And, you begin to think about, well, what's the long-term effect that this may have, and what potentially could I be passing on to my children? So that began starting me thinking about perhaps looking at different growing methods or changing some of the things that we had been doing in the past to reduce the amount of chemical intake that we were working with. And that was just kind of a lead into my ultimate decision to convert all of my operation over to organic production methods. And I took that, I started researching groves back in the early 80s, 81, 82, trying to determine, what we needed to do in order to have better production, lower inputs, things like that. So we found through our soil test that the organic matter in our soils had been almost completely depleted because of the use of chemical weed control or modern concept agriculture. The highest organic matter I had in my grove was 0.4%, less than 0.5%, and it went from there down to 0.2. So you're talking about almost none. So I realized that that was a concern, and there was something that we could do with that. So I had been kind of researching this out from all different angles, perspectives. The other thing that kind of was a contributor was in 81 and 82, here in Texas, we had the second and third largest grapefruit crops ever grown. And as a result, we had oversupply for the demand. And we were selling grapefruit for $15 a ton, which wasn't even making production cost.
Wow.
So those all factored in. And then Christmas Eve of 1983, we had a major freeze. And I made the decision, while most people felt like it was doomsday, it's the end type of thing, I thought this is a beginning for us. And so we began to convert our operation over to organic. And that's led us to almost, in January of this year, it was 40 years I've been doing it.
It's a complex kind of confluence of reasons, very personal, but also looking after the family farm, looking at survivability, really, in many ways. You must have been, at least on the pesticide end, very sympathetic to the whole Cesar Chavez movement and the fight against pesticides.
I found some alliance there.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. Wow. How did your workers test?
That's
Like
it was
you?
a blind to that study. I never received any results, only my own.
They would have received their own results.
I'm not even sure that they would receive them. I think the fact that they wanted this research done in order to compile their project to get the data that they needed or wanted to try and see if there was a real issue involved with pesticide residues in agricultural workers. So I don't think that they actually distributed that information.
The pesticide residue that you had in your body, which was high levels of concentration, as you described, how does the body get rid of those?
It doesn't. The body doesn't have the capability of removing those compounds, and they just get stored in fat and in the tissues in the body.
And if you continue to take those in, then you develop all kinds of things, cancerous and otherwise.
Oh, there's the potential for that.
But the potential.
Yeah, I don't say that that's the end result of those situations, but yeah, there's a potential for
There's
that,
a
for
potential.
Sure.
Wow. That's quite a story. I mean, that's kind of like really unpacking, a set of motivations for, it's multifaceted, it seems. So you started 40 years ago. You must have gone through some growing pains. No, I mean, you're looking at, like, your soil needs to change. You're looking at huge investments, and you have no idea how it's going to go. So you are like taking a leap of faith in this.
If I could tell you, Francisco, how many people thought I had gone crazy.
Including your father, I'm sure.
My father told me, he said, you will go broke trying to do this. Not a lot of support. Ridiculed in a lot of ways back in the early stages of this transition. But I told my father, I said, I have a vision and I have a plan, and I'm going to work the plan to create the vision. And so we're here 40 years later.
When did your father pass on?
He died in 2004.
What was his assessment of your work at that point?
We did have that conversation, and he said, he told me that he admired my devotion to my plan and my tenacity to make it work, and that he was extremely proud of the efforts that had been placed and the success that we had received over the years.
Good moment.
It was an excellent moment.
Yeah.
Satisfying.
How about your mother?
I think she's less vocal in those things, but I think she was very supportive and happy for the success that we were able to accomplish.
What is the scale of your work comparatively? If you look at the whole landscape of the state of Texas in farming, are you among the biggest ones?
No, we're, when you look
organic.
Organic. I can tell you this: we're the largest organic citrus operation in Texas. So that we can say without doubt.
Yeah.
We've grown a lot of things over the years as well. After the '89 freeze, we were out of production for a number of years, with citrus being able to be replanted and regrow to production stage, plus the rehabilitation of what survived. So we grew a lot of vegetables and different things that we did. And the only thing that we still grow today that we grew then is onions. So we still grow, acreage and onions as well.
And how many hours a week do you put into it now?
Well, not as many as I used to.
Well, how many did you used to? Let's say 25 years ago.
Well, when you start a business, you have to be dedicated to what it requires. And in the beginning, I sacrificed a lot of family time to be able to make to be successful in our business. And so there were days that 14, 16 hours, sometimes 18 hours, because when we started packing, because when we got into the business, we had to not only grow it, but we also had to have a packing facility to be able to pack it and then to be able to sell it. And so in the beginning, I did it all. I managed the groves, I oversaw the packing, and I did all the sales myself. And most of the time, I did a lot of the loading of the trucks. So yeah, some days were long, but as a result of that dedication, we were able to grow, become more successful, expand, and to further diversify the operation as far as what we needed to do.
So today you are not fully retired, are you?
No, semi-retired.
Semi. What does semi mean?
Well, I have some outside commitments besides the operation itself, but I spend time there during the weeks. Probably not as much time as my son would like me to be there, but he's very capable and does a good job, and so I have confidence in him and his abilities, so I don't worry as much about it.
So your son is now the lead on the farm?
Pretty much so, yeah.
So he would be like a 40-some-year-old young professional,
yes.
young farmer.
Yes.
Yeah. How does that jibe with the demography of farmers? Is he kind of an exception, or is there more of an interest in if I can call them kids, right?
Well, agriculture is a tough business, and it's expensive because of the capital investment you have to make in order to be able to get in. It's very difficult to start a business in agriculture today. Just the equipment cost, land availability, all of those things are part of it. And so it's almost like if you don't either inherit it, marry into it, or some other means like that, you really it's almost impossible to get into agriculture today. It's just that tough. So most of the people that I'm associated with are of my age group, and as a result of that, you're seeing less and less of that individual farming and more being sold out or purchased through corporate type of farming operations.
What did your brother decide to do when you decided to become a farmer? He went and did what?
When he had the opportunity to go off to college, that was his plans, and he's really never been back involved. I mean, he chose to diversify into the direction he wanted to pursue, and so he's, I think, very pleased with how things have turned out for himself.
What did your three other kids decide to do when your son decided to become the farmer?
Well, my other three children are daughters, and so they're just by virtue of that, they've not been incorporated into the business. They've diversified and followed paths either through their own decisions or those of their husbands.
Do they live around here?
3 of the 4 live here. My son and 2 of our daughters live here basically in Sherryland, and then I have one daughter who lives in San Antonio.
What are your words of wisdom for kids coming up today if they might have an interest in farming?
Well, I would tell them the same thing that people, when they would ask me why I chose agriculture, I would tell them that it's job security. And the reason I say that is everyone eats. And if you're in a position to be able to grow food for the human race, you will always have a job if you do it well.
All right. That's a good story. Good words of wisdom. When we come back, Dennis, we're going to get into the Texas Citrus Festival. All right, so we have a little bit of context here, so we know how Dennis has sort of come up. I think very interesting family story here, that at least in South Texas dates to 54, 55. But as he described his story, his father and the family did farming in Utah. So this agriculture kind of connection goes back at least a couple of generations and probably much farther back. So when we come back, we're going to center the story here around South Texas agriculture and how this part of the world has figured out ways to celebrate that. So stay with us.
The Museum of South Texas History presents Ranch Fest, featuring ranch-style food, live demonstrations, and performances. This event celebrates ranch life and heritage in South Texas with roping, wood carving, and more. Expect live performances by local conjunto and mariachi high school groups. And enjoy tacos, a ranch favorite. Bring family and friends to enjoy Ranch Fest, Saturday, February 10th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Museum of South Texas History in Edinburgh. The Museum of South Texas History presents Ranch Fest, featuring ranch-style food, live demonstrations, and performances. This event celebrates ranch life and heritage in South Texas with roping, wood carving, and more. Expect live performances by local conjunto and mariachi high school groups. And enjoy tacos, a ranch favorite. Bring family and friends to enjoy Ranch Fest, Saturday, February 10th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Museum of South Texas History in Edinburgh.
Welcome back to our museum Platica for today. I was checking the Facebook traffic and I noticed that somebody said, "Oh, that's scary," in a comment on Facebook. And so I thought, well, what's scary? I thought it must have been something about Dennis's storytelling. And so I was told here by Marcela, our camera person, that Melissa wrote, "Oh, that's scary," when Dennis was telling the story of the pesticides and how human beings can sort of like take in that, and it's really hard. So it is a scary story, but fortunately, Dennis, you seem to be just fine. And I think
Fortunately, blessed.
I think you're going to be okay. Uh, so I think just a set of stories that are very interesting in terms of the family and how the family got here, and then how you got into farming and the reasons why and that sort of thing. There is a longer narrative here that we're about to get into, which is about this big festival, the Texas Citrus Festival. And so in my reading of, say, South Texas history, there's some geographers who write about place myth, like how places are created. Sometimes Vegas, for example, other parts of the world. Like there's a mythology that almost needs to be concocted somehow. You bring in large palm trees, you write jingles about the Magic Valley, those kinds of things to create a place that could be ready-made for agriculture, but wasn't that. It was something else. But when you bring in agriculture, then the leadership might think about, how do we celebrate this? How do we memorialize this? How do we have fun with it? How do we validate this? How do we have pageantry around it? And as agriculture was taking off in the early 20th century, somebody came up with the idea to celebrate citrus. Dennis, what is that story as you understand it?
Well, as you indicated, the citrus industry was in its infancy at the time, and it was growing. And I think there was individuals who had a desire to help promote and create a greater interest about the picture of what they were trying to construct. And a gentleman by the name, I think, of Bob Ode was in the business league of the city of Mission, got together and they decided that they would have a citrus fiesta. And they put that together in 1932. At the time, it was a one-day event. They started off, I think, with a concert, a half-hour concert, and this was all held outside. Then they had kind of the royal pageantry of selecting the queen as well as the king. And the first king was John H. Sherry, who is kind of known as the father of the Texas citrus industry. He was the original large-scale promoter of citrus and selling it as well to investors in the areas outside of the area. They used to bring in trainloads of people back in the day to promote South Texas. And believe me, in the wintertime, South Texas is easy to promote. And so they were able to be, as land developers and promoters of the industry, they were able to bring these investors in and were successful in selling off tracts of land for that purpose to build the industry. So that was the beginning of the Citrus Fiesta, and it's been, I think the second one was 1934. 33, they didn't have it because of a hurricane that created some damage to the area. So since 1934, except during the World War II, it's been an annual event, an annual festival ever since. So that's the history of how it got started.
And it's a big deal.
It is a big deal for the citrus industry. There was a time when Texas had more citrus production, or trees planted, I should say, more acreage planted than either Florida or California. But since that time, things have changed. Florida has had greater acreage, in California as well than what Texas is, because we're basically a small geographical area that's suited for this particular production. And obviously, as we spoke before, water was the key factor in how far you could expand the industry.
There's a story in the John Sherry biography of how he was a very entrepreneurial businessman,
Yes.
very creative visionary, that sort of thing. But there's part of the story about how he went to California to learn the industry, to investigate how are modern practices sort of, shaking out in the California farming industry, agricultural industry. What do you know about that story and how some of the technological advances and wisdom in another part of the world, another part of the country, is imported into the valley?
I don't know a great deal about that, but what I do know is that through that effort that he made, they found improvements in the means of irrigation distribution for water to make it the delivery. That's one of the things that they worked on, as well as the design of packing facilities, how to utilize more mechanical improvements over just hand labor. So I think those are kind of the beginning parts of what he contributed to the industry.
There's also, at the museum, we just got this donation in the last few months of crate labels. So we have, from Mrs. P's, over 1,500 crate labels. They were almost all made in California, but for South Texas and northeastern Mexican growers.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful labels. What's your label? You have a label, and who makes your label?
Well, obviously it's a different type of label now, what we use, but when we first started our business, our first year of packing product, we basically used the name of our company, just South Tex Organics. And we created a label, and actually that first year I paid my son, who was just very young at the time, so much a label, and he was the one that was sticking these labels onto our generic citrus boxes. After we got through that first year, then we went to a little more of a commercialized type operation in that regard. We had everything pre-printed. We have several labels we use. We have Nature's Choice, which is what we package most of our fruit that goes into bags. We have the South Tex Organic label as well, and we also have our premium grade citrus, which is packed in the Royal Red. And our business has been built on specifically the grapefruit industry, because we have more production of grapefruit here in the area than we do oranges. And we're well known for the Texas grapefruit. So our business is probably 80% or 85% grapefruit, with somewhere between 15 and 20% of our production in oranges. So that's kind of our label and what we do.
When you have the festival, the Texas Citrus Festival, what is your estimation about how much citrus is actually promoted, as opposed to just having kind of a big festival? What is the educational component to it?
Well, throughout the years, they've had what they would actually have is the citrus showing, and what they would do is they would have kids in 4-H and FFA go out to the groves and pick the fruit that would be very representative of each particular variety, whether it be an orange and the multiple varieties within the orange category, lemons, grapefruit, tangerines, kumquats, anything that was citrus, and they would actually have a show where people could actually walk through and see the different varieties in their most respective form of that particular variety. And so that was an educational component of the industry. So that was part of it over the years that they've used that. I think promoting the industry as a whole just by drawing attention to the community. I know that the parade of oranges that will happen this coming Saturday has, in years past, has drawn crowds of over 100,000 people.
Wow.
So you have that type of exposure as well that draws people to the city of Mission, which is actually known as the home of the grapefruit.
Who branded that? Was it the festival, or was it the city, or a consultant of some sort?
I think it was a combination of many different groups within that to assign that name to the city of Mission.
And that is your greatest crop also as a businessman.
That is correct.
The grapefruit.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Huh. Talk to us about the festival. Like what's the structure of it? What happens? What can people expect, or what do people expect?
Well, over the years, there's been transition within the festival, but what really brought its great prominence, I think, was they used to have what they would call the product costume show, and these were elaborate dresses or costumes.
So, if you look at that dress there, that the audience is seeing, how would you describe that dress? What's the product, and what's the composition of the actual dress?
Well, that one is done a number of years ago, probably in the beginning stages of and everything on that particular costume is covered in some form of natural grown product here in South Texas. I can't really see the detail from that, but I would assume that they've covered that in
It's corn husk.
Corn husk.
Yes, corn husk. They possibly have some of the costumes were covered in sliced citrus that had been dried and different things like that. So this particular
So would that be uncomfortable to wear, Dennis?
it's a little stiff. I have to admit, my children have actually worn costumes that my mother and my aunt made over the years, and they complained that it's a little scratchy.
It's a little
stiff.
scratchy.
But the thing about it is that it's evolved from those photos that you're seeing now to a point where they have taken products because they want certain colors or certain textures, and they use those by means of dehydration or microwave or gelatinized products that they can actually use. They use seeds of all kinds, citrus seeds, onion seeds, pumpkin seeds, whatever kind of seeds that they need in order to decorate and get the design that they're looking for. This was actually attributed to one of the original folk arts of the United States, was this particular product costume show. So unfortunately, that it's not as big a part of the event as it used to be, because as I was telling them earlier, is that back when these were all being done, most of the ladies who were working were stay-at-home moms. So they were they didn't have, they weren't part of the workforce that took out 40 hours out of their week. So they had more time to devote to doing those kind of things.
What would have been the last year when a dress like that was created?
I don't have an answer for you. I don't know, because they still have the product costume show. It's just not part of the main coronation like they used to have it. When 25, 30, 40 years ago, it took up the entire week. The fiesta did. They had a royal reception, which was done a week ago, this past Saturday. And they would have that. Then they have the coronation, which was going to be held this week on Thursday. In fact, tonight, well, the coronation will be.
There's the 1986
Yeah.
Texas Citrus Fiesta Duchesses.
Right.
Wow.
And so.
So this is Kelly. She's one of our trustees.
Yes.
Kelly Pollock Ortega, and she actually wrote a paper for one of her college classes in 1986. And so I think that she mentioned that I'm a Duchess now and will be the Queen Citriana come January, she said.
Yeah.
And she wrote about the composition of her dress as well. And she said that it doesn't really hold well often. Yeah. Where do you store that? Where do you keep that? Yeah.
They're a one-time purpose type dress. My daughters have all participated over the years in the fiesta. One of them, when was 6, when she was 6 years old, she was Princess Anna. So that was like the little queen, if you want to call it that. And so, and then we've had, that's our daughter who was Princess of Orange Blossom in the royal court. And another daughter who was actually the Duchess of Rio Red. So, in fact, my granddaughter is that's her there.
This is your granddaughter.
This is my granddaughter.
This
Fourth
is
generation.
This is from what
involvement.
year?
This is from this year.
From this year.
She represents. In fact, that was taken Saturday night.
How about
this
that?
past Saturday night at the royal reception, and I had the honor to be able to escort her.
And what is her name?
Her name is Elle Holbrook.
Okay. All right, so she would be the daughter of your son who works
With us, yes.
the farm, yeah.
Mhm.
Wow. All right. What has been the impact or the contribution of the festival to this region and to the state as a whole?
That's a good question, Francisco. I'm not sure in the realm of the entire state. We've had a representation over the duration of time. I know that I was fortunate to serve as president of the Citrus Fiesta back in the mid-'80s. And we took a float to the Cotton Bowl Parade, or to the Cotton Bowl Parade, and actually was able to have that float representing the Texas Citrus Fiesta on national exposure, because that's nationally televised.
Yeah.
For the area here, the duchesses that we have that represent the different young women from different areas of the valley. At one point, there used to be a representative from every town. Brownsville would be Charles Mercedes with the livestock, Duchess of the livestock show, and different cities had different. McAllen was the city of palms. Edinburgh was was the Duchess of Orange. So each city had a representation. So it would draw the valley area as a community into the festival as well.
It's been a big deal during the 20th century and even into.
Yes.
It sounds like it hasn't really waned in interest.
No, I mean, we've had some, I think, freezes, which has had an effect on acreage, and different things. COVID was a kind of stopped everybody in their tracks for a while. So I think we're at a point now where we are looking at the Citrus Fiesta as what do we do to renew and rejuvenate and to put new energies into it. And the city of Mission has been very supportive and has a lot of desire to be more actively involved, which I think has a great potential to help the Citrus Fiesta continue to rebound from some of the negative aspects of COVID and freezes and things that will solidify the future of the festival.
So you think that there's enough commitment and enough momentum to continue to sustain that?
Oh, I believe so. I think, yes.
What about the future of agriculture in South Texas?
Well, I think you go anywhere. Agriculture is a difficult business, and there's But as I said, there's a future always for agriculture. As long as you're providing a supply of food for people, agriculture is a necessity of life. And so with that, I think that there'll always be, agriculture will always be here. It may change in its form and in its basic configuration, if you will, but I think, there's always going to be that opportunity. And I think the fact is that South Texas still has good agricultural land. This is a historic river delta that has very rich soils that provide great growing for whether it be citrus or vegetables or any commodity.
There's a story that we've kind of incubated here at the museum of something that happened in 1904 when John Klausner owned the San Juan plantation just south of Far, had built a pump house and grew the most beautiful sugarcane, the most lush sugarcane in the world. And he entered in 1904 his sugarcane at the World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri. And he won the gold medal. We have that gold medal here at the museum. That signaled the turning point in South Texas economy, history, culture, etc. Because 1904 is when the railroads come in, the land development companies come in, the chambers of commerce come in, and then those leaders then would lead this effort to essentially create this magic valley. And there was no turning back, because eventually, in fact, there was one guy who was at the World's Fair when Sherry won his gold medal. He was like sitting right in the front row. His name was Henry Farr, Pharr. Would be an investor, he and a guy named Kelly, in the creation of this irrigation system, in the early century, which would then be elaborated, and which then, John Sherry would step into and say, this is interesting. Fertile land, as you describe it, as a historic delta. And then we get all of these things that grow out of it, including the Citrus Festival. 1904 was a watershed year that turned everything around, created kind of this template, for a brand new world in South Texas. What is the new world in South Texas for the next century?
Well, I don't have my crystal ball with me today, but, I'm not sure. I think that there's still positivity for, we're experiencing a tremendous amount of growth in the area. Diversification in industries and income opportunities for people. Agriculture will still have a role. It may not be as significant as it has been in the past, but it will always remain. You still have so many acres of South Texas ranch land that's still providing beef cattle, as well as still, the wildlife and everything else that goes along with that. So, and I still think the future for the area is bright. I think it'll continue as it has in the past, possibly diversified, but still it will be a positive place to be and experience.
Have you also seen people come together differently in the last 10, 15, 20 years?
In what regard?
Because there was always a time, and I grew up in Nelson, so I always saw this tension, like, the workers and the owners. There was always this tension. Now, they always worked well together, but, I mentioned the Cesar Chavez and the tension that would have created between the workers wanting to unionize for better wages.
Sure.
Tension. It's been a historic tension.
I think when you have people in general, there's always going to be different views and different motivations. But I think in general we've seen a stronger effort of bridging those things. Labor has become, in the past, labor was always not a concern because there was ample supply. Nowadays, it's difficult to find the labor force that you need, especially if you're working in agriculture, because those jobs are laborious. They're sometimes difficult. Those are all things that you look at, and so we have to be more diligent in making sure that the needs of our employees are taken care of and that they're provided for in a way that assures them of their profitability as well as individuals and families.
So this will be the last question. So you think your parents would have thought we made a good choice by coming down here?
There's no doubt.
No doubt.
No doubt at all. The Rio Grande Valley has been an extreme blessing for our family. We have, with my father's vision of coming here, has enabled us to become part of the community, to be a positive influence, we hope, to what's transpired and what influences that we have had, as well as just it's been a true blessing to our family. We've been successful and prosperous, and I think my father, in looking back, would have no regrets. My grandfather was not happy with my father's decision. In fact, he made the comment to my dad. He said, "You'll go down there, go broke, and you'll be back here working for your brothers." And my father was bound and determined that that wasn't going to happen. And there were some rough years in the beginning, without question, without doubt. But perseverance and making the efforts that was required to be successful were accomplished, and as a result, we have been blessed as a result.
Dennis, thank you so much. I was about to sign off here, but then I got this flurry of comments. There's one person, Lali, who's a good friend of the museum. She said, "I was named after Drusilla Harvey, who was involved in construction and hand beating of Citriana gowns made of dried fruits and seeds." And somebody said, "Wow, that's art," about the Citriana gowns. Somebody else said that I was under the impression Texas was known for oranges.
No, we are, I'll tell you very briefly, when I made the decision to convert to organics, I researched this out with a lot of the people that were buyers for retail and throughout the area of the country, and without question, the comment was back, "Well, you guys grow the greatest grapefruits. I mean, that's really what we would like to see." It says, when we compare your grapefruit to Florida or California, there's just no comparison. You have a sweeter grapefruit. It's not sour like it is from other growing regions. And so that was part of my desire, my determination based on that feedback to really focus on that.
When Eleanor Roosevelt got on a train and came down to give a talk at the Edinburgh Junior College in the late 1930s, she wrote in her journal, and the topic for her journal entry was a grapefruit that she had. In Edinburgh, Texas, she said that she loved the grapefruit. Yeah. Dennis, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
I really, really enjoyed listening to your stories and
Thank you
and
for
also
the opportunity.
thinking also about what might be on the horizon. I think that's thoroughly exciting for South Texas. So thank you, friends of the museum. And so with this, we sign off on our January 2024 Museum Platicas. We will see you next month for the next edition of our Platica.